Welcome into the DNVR Rockies podcast presented by Strava Craft Coffee. Remember to use that promo code DNVR20 because when you do, you save 20% off your entire purchase of that CBD-infused, deliciously rich, and potentially life-altering Strava Craft Coffee. I'm your host, Drew Creasman. I'm the managing editor of DNVR Rockies. With me, as always, is beat writer Patrick Lyons, and joining us has become more regular, and we are very, very excited about that. You know, of course, as the voice of the Rockies on TV at AT&T SportsNet and the host of the Drew Goodman podcast, well, it's Drew Goodman.
Funny how that works, right?
Yes. Name of the podcast came real easy, right? It was right there.
Do you guys have anything to talk about this week, or is it kind of a mundane, pre-spring training, midwinter week?
Yeah. Sipping a little Strava coffee, just... How's your week been, Drew?
You know what? It's been interesting to say the least. It's been eventful. It's hey, listen, I'm like so many fans out there. You're disappointed. You're upset. Even though the three of us had talked about this before. This was not a shock. You last year at this time, I didn't think it was going to happen, but this year when I was asked on various radio shows or podcasts, I felt like this was going to happen. So it was not a shock, but when it becomes real, it still makes you pause. And it's tough. It's tough when you lose a guy that's on a Hall of Fame track, a guy that you hope is a Rocky, just like Todd Helton is for the entirety of his career. And a guy, who just signed a very lucrative deal just a couple of years ago. So it's disappointing. It's upsetting. I feel the fans' pain. I get it.
Yeah, the rumors had been going around for a while, and that becomes normal. That becomes the way of the game, where all the big city clubs and the large market teams, they look at the Rockies roster and go, hey, let's just pick the best players off. And you hear it, but it doesn't make it any easier when it actually goes down.
No, Patrick, it sucks. Let's be honest. And we've seen more and more of that, and nobody wants to be looked upon as a AAA affiliate of all the wealthy teams in baseball. It's not like the Rockies, don't dole out big contracts. I mean, they paid Nolan $260 million. Charlie's an 8-figure contract. You go back, Helton, Tulowitzki, way back, and you have the left-hander Hampson. So Hampton, I should say. I'm thinking of Garrett Hampson right now, but Mike Hampton. So the Rockies have doled out contracts. It's not the first time they've made an unpopular trade. The last couple, ultimately, as upset as people were, worked out okay. We know with Matt Holliday, and I'm sure you fellas have discussed this, is that they got back Carlos Gonzalez, who became a great player, right? And he was one of the central pieces in the 2009 run, which, for my dollar, fellas, it's still probably the best Rockies team of all time. Houston Street on the back end. So that one really worked out. As popular as a guy and as good a player as Matt Holliday was. The Tulowitzki one, Tulo unfortunately could never stay healthy, and the Rockies didn't get much in return. The Reyes debacle, we know what happened there. Jeff Hoffman, he was just recently traded. He was the centerpiece of the prospects coming back. It never happened at the big league level. At least it has not to this juncture with Hoffman. This one, we'll see what happens going forward. But again, I feel the pain of the fans without question right now.
We do want to get to a little later on, just kind of sharing in some of our all-time favorite Nolan Arenado moments. But since we do have a couple of questions along the same lines, and you brought it up there, I figured I'd go ahead and ask you. We've got Eric, who's been joining us, a Cardinals fan. We've had a few of those around the show the last couple of days. I can't quite figure out why. Ask him, what do you think about the return? And then a little further down, we had somebody asking particularly about Gomber. I'll see if I can find that one. But have you had a chance to look into these guys a little bit and get a little industry scuttlebutt? I also get the chance to use the word scuttlebutt. So thank you, Joseph, for the question on
great. It's a great Scrabble word if you can accumulate that many letters. So, maybe you have to just end it at butt and leave out the scuttle. I have read, as I'm sure many of you have, various scouting reports on the quartet of minor league players that the Rockies got back. What is it? Torres, the corner infielder, that's primarily a third baseman. He was the Midwest League MVP a couple of years ago. One of the things that makes things difficult, not just for the Rockies making a trade right now and getting prospects in return, but any team that you've seen make a deal this offseason, because minor league players did not play last year. So you're going off, a scouting report that's at least 18 to 20 months old. You don't know if guys gotten bigger, stronger. How will they adjust to, a competitive year off? He's the most, at least right now, the intriguing guy, because if things pan out, and who the hell knows with a young player, he could be a 20-plus home run type of player at the big league level. Big, strong, tremendous bat speed. The kid from Georgia, the arm, and I'm still getting to know the names, and I don't have them sitting.
Tony Losi.
Yeah, I mean, big arm, 95-plus guy whose touches the upper 90s. I saw last year, was it last year or 2 years? I think it was 2 years ago. In 17 innings, he struck out like 30-plus hitters, which, that gets your attention right away. So, the stuff's there. The walk rate was high, not unlike a lot of power arms at that stage of their career. So it's intriguing. Could he eventually be part of the back end of a bullpen? Potentially. There's another pretty good arm in there as well. The Mateo kid is, the son of, a former big leaguer. The Rockies, I know this, I can add this to something you probably have not read. The Rockies in his draft year, when Gil was coming out, they really liked him a lot, and they wanted to draft him in the third round. And the Cardinals were right in front of the Rockies and took him. And that was, one of those draft room letdowns, because the Rockies, again, really liked his makeup, his upside, et cetera. So now they have him, and we'll see what happens. He's a shortstop with a good glove, good arm, really good instincts. Again, son of a big leaguer, so Benji was a really good player. In fact, I had Huey on the podcast that came out today, Jeff Hewson. And Jeff played with his dad, and he said not only a great guy, but fundamentally just he's a baseball player, and so you assume the son is the exact same way. We'll see how the bat comes around, and the other arm seems to be more of an organizational arm. He's not a real power guy, so we'll see down the road. I mean, I share in people's disappointment. The reality is the Rockies couldn't pry away any of the quote unquote top prospects, Liberatore or Gorman, the corner infielder that are basically 1-2 in the Cardinals system.
As you said, yeah, great podcast today with Jeff Hewson there, where he shares his thoughts on Arenado, along with all the negotiations going on between the Players Association and MLB, where that might head. But as you said, Hewson played with Benji Gil, the father. Well, Benji Gil was also on that 2002 Angels team, which Bud Black was a pitching coach on. So I think you still have those connections between Gil and the Rockies. And, I think Montero, Elihuris Montero is that guy that could really step up, because his numbers in 2019, while, weren't terribly exciting, he did have a lot of wrist injuries. He broke his hemate bone, which was what Josh Fuentes also broke coincidentally in 2019. That sapped a lot of his power out of his bat. So as you were talking before, I think the trade with Tulowitzki is probably most similar to this with Arenado, where again you have a superstar still in his prime. Interesting thing is, after the Tulowitzki trade, Rockies got back to the playoffs 2 years later. Will that happen after the Arenado deal? We'll see.
Yeah, and again, there's no denying how difficult a period of time this is for people who follow the Rockies, and how the decline has been rapid. I mean, in 2018, the Rockies finished in a dead heat with the team over the last several years, not just because they're world champions, but the team that's been celebrated as the top team in the sport for a number of years, even though they just captured one championship. The Rockies were in a dead heat after 162 with the Dodgers in 2018, and it's fallen off, somewhat precipitously since then. And I think that one of the things that Dick Monfort offered up the other day, which I agree with wholeheartedly, and I think every Rocky fan would say the same thing, the Rockies miscalculated losing DJ LeMahieu. And if they could do it all over again, they would have done more to make sure, or to try at least, to keep DJ LeMahieu, because not only do we know he's a phenomenal talent, even though he's more of a quiet guy. You guys have been around sports a long time. You can be quiet and be a tremendous leader because of your toughness, because of your work ethic, because of just how you play the game day in and day out. And DJ unequivocally was that guy. And so I look at this downfall of 2019 and the shortened season last year, which started well and ended poorly. I think you could point back and say, man, that LeMahieu deal and in not getting a deal, I should say, really hurt the Rockies as much as some of the failed signings in free agency.
That's something we've talked about before on the show, and I've had bits and pieces of information, and it's one of those things that, I feel like fans have often stated it, and I've done my best to unpack how this isn't quite accurate, that the Rockies took Daniel Murphy over DJ LeMahieu. Like, it was this 1-for-1, like they just decided, we want that guy instead of that guy. I was just wondering if, since you brought it up, you could shed a little light on your perspective on how that went down and what that winter was like while the Rockies were trying to make that decision.
I don't think the Rockies ever, didn't understand how valuable DJ was. Maybe slightly, because they didn't sign him. So let me not say they understood, hey, can we move on without DJ? I think, as Dick Monfort said, we would have done that one differently. But at the time, I think with any team that's not the Yankees, the Dodgers, the big market teams, big dollar teams, and even those teams are being more judicious in how they spend money. They want to stay under that luxury cap. The Rockies said, all right, we're draft and develop organization. So when we have another guy that's ready to step in, we may have to make some unpopular decisions. They had hoped that Brendan Rodgers, who 2 years ago, and even in less time than that, more recently, was looked upon as one of the top prospects in baseball, not just the top prospect in the Rockies organization, of which he was listed that on 3 occasions. And so they felt like, okay, Brendan Rodgers will step in. There may be a learning curve, but we really like the upside of this guy. We'll go out and sign Daniel Murphy, who forever, even though he is a defensive liability, I think the Rockies felt like, okay, he's better at first base, certainly than second. We'll get by with him there. But, this is a bat that's going to produce 40-plus doubles, and he's going to hit 15 to 20 home runs. And even though his year in Chicago wasn't tremendous, if memory serves me accurately, he had a much better second half. And I will tell you, and I'm not trying to tout the company line here by any stretch, I didn't want to see DJ go, but I liked at the time the Murphy signing. I remember him in Washington. I remember him with the Mets. I mean, I followed the Mets, as you guys know. They were my team growing up, so I still keep a close eye on them. Daniel Murphy at Coors Field, I'm thinking 45 doubles. I'm thinking 20-plus home runs. The dude flat can hit. Yeah. Not a great defender. Unfortunately, we saw snippets of the old Daniel Murphy, but we saw much longer periods. And granted, he was hurt. He broke the finger, and I don't think he was the same that first year. But he was. He wasn't the same guy, unfortunately. And I thought that was a pretty good signing at the time. I'll give you a couple others, fellas. I mean, because it's really easy to Monday morning quarterback any kind of trade or free agent signing. We all kind of do it, right? Especially in the industry the three of us are in, right?
Right.
But I like the Wade Davis signing. I'm like, that's a really good move. I mean, yeah. Wade Davis has been elite. Love it. Tough guy. Won a World Series. Universally respected. Maybe he wasn't in the middle of his prime, but there was still, by recent statistical analysis, he was still a really good back end guy. The one for Shaw, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I didn't that I loved it. I'm not going to say I didn't like it, because Brian Shaw had been really good as a setup guy on a really good team for a number of years. The only caution I had with that one was he had been the most utilized pitcher in baseball over the previous 5 years, so you always worry about arm fatigue. That one, as we know, didn't work out. So there's a couple in there that you said, hey, those aren't bad, and as they turned out, they weren't good.
Yeah, I also like Murphy. I thought he was going to be a great hit in Coors Field, and everything that he brings to the clubhouse too. I mean, keep in mind, again, what he did in 2015 in the playoffs, where it seemed like he was going to hit a home run every at bat in that postseason, and was really the guy that helped bring about this launch evolution, or the launch angle revolution that came about. And you go, that's a good baseball mind you want leading in your clubhouse.
I always would state this a couple of years ago, that when you look up professional hitter in the dictionary, there's a few guys that pop up, and Daniel Murphy was one of them. I'm a big Michael Brantley guy. I was hoping some way, somehow the Rockies, with him being a free agent twice in the last few years, that he would have become a Rocky, because he's a great clubhouse guy. He can flat hit, doesn't strike out. Murphy, similar guy. And the first year, maybe you give him a pass because he broke his finger on the second day in a Rockies uniform. Last year, he got off to a pretty good start when the Rockies were 11-3, and then it was so bad that Buddy wasn't even playing him really the last month of the season. That one's a disappointment. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you 2+ years later that I didn't like it when he signed. I was disappointed as all heck to see DJ leave. But I thought that Murphy would be a really productive offensive player with Colorado.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did, and so that's been rough. I do want to move us into the Nolan Arenado remembrance section of the podcast, but before we do that, one last thing in this general area, I'll just give you this opportunity, because there's a lot of questions here in the comments, as we would have expected on this realm. So I'll just basically put it this way, as someone who does act as a voice of the team, with the press conference the other day with Jeff Bridich and Dick Monfort, and and you see the fan side of it too. You're out there taking all of it in, and you see this right now, just the anger toward the team and people saying the things that they're saying. And what is your take on where that's at, and if Dick Monfort and Jeff Bridich are the guys to see us through this next era of Rockies baseball, what can they do to get these people back, other than win baseball games? We know eventually you win enough baseball games, people come back, but what is your take on that just sort of element of it right now? I guess what we would call the toxicity or the anger in the Rockies community.
Well, as I've said a few times, and I said on my podcast as well, that I understand it. I mean, you absolutely understand it, and have similar emotions. The only thing that turns the narrative in sports, whether it's this situation or any other that you can look at it current or past, look at the Houston Texans and Deshaun Watson. Winning cures everything. I mean, there was similar rhetoric, and understandable at the time when Tulowitzki was traded to Toronto. We mentioned the holiday trade earlier, and if you win, and if new stars emerge, like a Trevor Story emerged, like a Carlos Gonzalez emerged back in 2009 and in 2010, I think he was the best position player in baseball, then it's easier to move forward. But right now, it's hot. Right now, it's at the forefront of everybody's mind. Right now, you have so many people that are frustrated by the pandemic and are hurting financially, hurting in so many ways. And this just, exacerbates their disappointment, their anger, and what's going on overall. And I would be an idiot to say that I didn't get it. I do get it. I feel it. Even as a broadcaster for the team, I feel it, man. I'm going to miss Nolan being out there. The Rockies are not better today than they were, 4 days ago when Nolan was still going to wear purple pinstripes. There's no way to spin that. There's no way to look at it any differently. But as I often say, as you guys know, I coach over at Arapahoe High School on the side, and I had 3 boys that play, and I always say, listen, you control the controllables. As a fan, you can't control who the players are, who the manager is, who the GM, the owner in any city, and you just have to decide, hey, what am I going to do? Am I going to be a fan, and I'm going to understand there's always going to be a roller coaster ride? How do you think Red Sox fans felt? And they have deeper pockets than virtually anybody in the sport. How do you think they felt last year before the pandemic? This pre-pandemic, this before the owners took a bath financially. They let a younger player and dare I say a better player, as great as Nolan is. I mean, Nolan's one of the 6, 8, 10 best players in baseball without argument. But Mookie Betts is probably number 2 in baseball to Mike Trout. And there are probably some who'd make an argument, man, it's closer than many people realize. They traded Mookie Betts. So it doesn't just happen in Colorado. It doesn't just happen in the quote unquote mid-market cities.
Yeah. All right. Well, probably a lot of people out there needing a little bit of medicine. And no, that's not a segue into a Breck Brew read. It's a segue into real medicine read. I'm really excited about this new partner because the Zoom Care video care folks are offering something for people like me, not super stoked about going into the doctor's office. Not only in general does that kind of give me the heebie-jeebies, but right now, I don't know if you've heard, there's a thing going on that's getting people sick, and a lot of sick people go to the hospital. So nobody likes to do that stuff, and right now, we've got this great thing for you, video care. It's like a trip just on Zoom. You go to your doctor's office straight from your couch. You can see, hear, and chat with your doctor just like a traditional visit. Get secure access, urgent, primary, and specialist care, including mental health. Video care is covered by most private insurers, usually with a copay. Check out zoomcare.com to get started. That's ZOOMCARE.com. Nothing better than getting a diagnosis from your doc while sitting in your own living room and in your pajamas. Trust me, it's fun. So supporting our partners, that's supporting us, and helping this partner out to increase their videos from Colorado. You check them out today. It's super, super easy. Just go to zoomcare.com for all the details that you need and get your medicine, take care of your health, and then immediately head over to DraftKings.com and place a couple of bets and get that heart rate going back up again. You know how to get excited. You got to do both ends, right? You got to take care of it both ways. My understanding is there's a big football game coming up this weekend. They're playing the foosball out there for a superb owl. Is that right? A superb owl is my understanding what's going on this weekend. And they got a great deal set up for you right now. If a touchdown is scored, seems plausible, well, then they will double your money. That's right. You place a bet. That bet happens to win and a touchdown is scored. Again, highly plausible. Then you're going to double your money right now. And DraftKings is always throwing out all kinds of bonuses like that. A lot of great deals for you. Sometimes they just give you free money to bet on whatever you want. So make sure you're not getting left behind in this fun new world, even if you're betting $1 and $5 amounts at a time like I do, just to spice things up a little bit. Or if you like to really get into it, follow our DNVR bets, guys. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code DNVR to get a shot at doubling your money if a touchdown is scored in Sunday's game. That's code DNVR to get a shot at doubling your money. Must be 21 or older, Colorado only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/prediction-challenge-DFS for details. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.
Hey, Drew, I want to be the first to to second what DraftKings has come out with. I really, really like the chances of there being a touchdown on Sunday between Kansas City and Tampa.
Look,
another hot take.
Goodman, 13-time broadcaster of the year for nothing.
That's right. Hey, perhaps more than one.
Ooh, getting really steamy.
We got the over on 1.5 touchdowns.
We're
breaking news here.
This is the most baseball-related Super Bowl I think we've had, because you've got, of course, Patrick Mahomes, son of Pat Mahomes, and owner of the Kansas City Royals. He did purchase some stake in the past year of the Royals, and Tom Brady, who was drafted by the Montreal Expos out of high school, an 18th round pick in, I want to say maybe 96, somewhere around there. Maybe it might have been 98.
I got to tell you guys, I'm retelling a story from a buddy of mine I heard today. I don't know if you were watching to Matt Vasgersian and Harold Reynolds this morning. I know as baseball folks, it's kind of must-watch television in the morning on the MLB Network. But F.P. Santangelo, who had a nice career primarily with Montreal, was telling this story with them today. He was with the Expos, as you guys mentioned. Brady's drafted out of Sarah High School, where Barry Bonds, you may recall, had gone to high school, among other great athletes. And the Expos really wanted to sign this catcher, Tom Brady. And FP, they're out on the West Coast, and FP, he wants to get his, work in before the game. And a buddy of his who was a scout said, hey, really, will you get with this guy and kind of get in his ear? We really want to sign him. So he was down on the field taking BP with them, and he was taking forever in the cage, and a lot of the veteran players were like, who is this kid? He's taking too much time between pitches and BP, and so they're starting to give him a hard time. And so FP's trying to be a good guy, and he's talking to him a little bit more, and he said, he's getting his background. He said, wait a second, you go to Michigan? His mom, FP Santangelo, who's now the analyst and does a great job for a long time with the Washington Nationals, and he said, you're going to Michigan? You're a quarterback there? And he said, yeah. He goes, my mom went to Michigan. All of a sudden, he cared less about having him sign with Montreal, and he cared more about him helping the Wolverines play because he was a big Wolverine fan. And ultimately, I'm going out on a limb quite a bit here today, guys, but I'm going to say that Brady made the right decision in going football as opposed to signing with the Expos.
Good, another great take. I think Tom Brady, to go one step further, may be considered one of the best quarterbacks of his generation. There, I said it. it.
Well, yeah, listen, we continue to be icebreakers here and cutting edge theories, at least in sports, right?
Well, blowing us away. I was going to say, do you have a pick of the week for us?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I saw a couple of props
on
there.
I've got two. I've got the first points and the first touchdown, because I want to try to win some money here for some people. So I think Tampa Bay is going to have the first score of the game on a field goal. That's plus 425. But I want to win you more than that. The first touchdown of the game, Kansas City's Travis Kelce, plus 650 in the big game this weekend.
Wow,
that's you can't go wrong with Travis Kelce, right?
That's good.
I like the number. It's a good payout. That's kind of the favorite, but still, I mean, that's quality return on investment there.
All right. So now let us turn into the second. No, I'll get it right. The second segment, of course, of our podcast, presented by Strava Craft Coffee. And we do want to talk about just all-time Nolan Arenado moments. Share yours in the comments, memories, moments, plays, clutch hits, just things he did. That one time he threw sesame or seeds into his mouth, and then we were sunflower seeds into his mouth, and then we gift that forever. But I did want to start with you, Drew, about when you like images, just the first couple of handful of images. When you think about Nolan Arenado, what are the few that come to mind that are kind of the top line takeaways?
I wanted this to be organic, so I knew we were going to talk about this, but I didn't want to write down a bunch of memories and look back because the way my brain works, which is probably scary to begin with, but I have really, really good short-term retention. When I'm studying for a game and I could say, he went to Sarah High School and he was born on this date and his dad played, basketball at Bowling Green in Kentucky, and all kinds of superfluous statistics. And the next day you go, hey, what was the final score? And I may forget what the heck the final score was the next day.
Right.
We all go. But the first things that jump to mind are probably very similar for all Rockies fans. The tarp catch where you go, whoa, first of all, it's a great catch. Second of all, to have the chutzpah to run full speed toward an object that is not going to move and could very possibly hurt you shows
the tarp did not get out of the way.
Right. The tarp's not going to move. It's not going to roll in a different direction. It talks about his competitive level. It speaks to his toughness, all of those things. And then his great athletic ability to make that catch. But what's sometimes forgotten is he almost got a double play on that at third base, which would have been like the all-time greatest play defensively that we've seen. So that's number one. I'm sure it's number one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The Father's Day walk-off cycle home run again, a no-brainer right at the top. And then in the aftermath, when he got cut, I think it was with Charlie, right? The edge of
the helmet.
Got some, so now he's bleeding. He's the center of attention. It's a sellout crowd. It's Father's Day, no less. That was a beautiful happening for the Rockies and for Nolan Arenado. And the third one that I'm going to give you, and I'm going to maybe stand up and try to, on the screen, show you what most people never see. So I'll take you behind the curtain a little bit. Nolan is so fixated on his craft offensively, not that he wasn't defensively, we know that, but whether it was in the clubhouse, whether it was in the dugout, whether it was in between rounds of batting practice, wherever he was always doing a little pantomime drill to remind himself to stay inside the baseball and to stay on his body line. Exactly.
Yeah,
you're doing it,
he would do
so
that.
he'd be right here and he'd be standing there. He would be in the middle of the clubhouse, getting out of the shower, all day long. That's what he does as a reminder, a muscle memory thing. And that is, I know that's not a play on the field, but that is something whenever I think of Nolan, I think of that.
Yes. Oh, that's so great. I'm glad you brought that one up because I might not have thought about it or remembered it. But yeah, I think I mentioned that once on the podcast before of like, yeah, you'll stand there and have a solid 5-10 minute conversation with him. And the whole time he's talking to you, he's there, he's present, but he's also taking BP like in his mind.
Yeah. Hey, a lot of us have ADD and that was, that was one of his things. And Cargo used to do a great impersonation of Nolan doing just that. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, that's a good way that you summed it up with those three things, because it's a play right on the tarp. It's that moment. It's the whole thing, but particularly just bleeding. And then just a detail that you get from knowing a person and seeing them day in and day out. And you wouldn't be wrong if you just picked just the greatest highlights. The thing that I loved about the tar play, I went back and watched it again a bunch of times last night, is the wherewithal to know where he was at, because he didn't necessarily know maybe there was a tarp right there, but he kind of, elevated his body because he knew he was getting close to the edge. But there was a corner of the dugout too that he goes right by that he just misses clipping if he's maybe about a foot to the left, where the left side of his body would have hit a piece of that. And I'm sure you've broken down that play for years and years, and it just speaks to, again, his competitiveness, his wherewithal, and just everything that we've seen, out of the playbook for him defensively, because he's one of the few players, I think, you almost prefer his defensive abilities than his offensive ones. It goes like Ozzie Smith and then Nolan Arenado. When you think about great highlights, you almost want to see his defensive plays first before you want to see what he does at the plate.
Yeah, a couple other notes. I think my fourth choice would be just a compilation of, especially defensively, of plays, because I don't know how many times over his career with the Rockies, we had the phrase Nolan being Nolan, and are you kidding me? And sometimes it was just ho hum, where it was anything but ho hum, and it was diving to the line. It was going to his left. It was throwing from the seat of his pants. There were just so many. It's interesting because whenever we talk about athleticism, we're always talking about run fast, jump high, of which Nolan does neither, right? Yet,
right.
His short area quickness, his hand-eye coordination, his ability to field a baseball is remarkable, and then throw from every angle on the clock with great power. I mean, it's not talked about a lot. I mean, Nolan's fielding ability has been celebrated, 4 platinum gloves, and maybe the greatest third baseman defensively we've ever seen. But sometimes we forget this guy has a cannon,
Right.
And he's 99% of the time going to hit you in the chest from third base. So that is lost, I think, periodically when we discuss his greatness defensively.
So there was a concept we came up with here on the podcast a couple of years ago that I'm only now realizing probably came out of your evolution as a broadcaster during this time, because for the first several years it was, stop it, are you kidding me? And those were the calls when Nolan would do stuff. By year 5, he might go 2 or 3 steps into foul territory, throw across his body, get the guy by 2 steps, and your call would be, Nolan doing what he does, gets him again anyway. And it was your non-sell that would almost make it that much better. And I'm realizing now that that's probably how I ended up coming up with the Arenado Meter, which was this idea that, like, there are some plays that would be the career best play for anybody else in the game. And Nolan might bust it out on a Thursday, and we all go, all right, fair enough. Yeah, that's just a thing. Doesn't make his top 10, doesn't make his top 20, even though that might have been somebody else's best. So when we would run out the Arenado meter, we'd start grading him on this, and he'd do something great. And we'd be like, that's a 5 out of 10 on the Arenado meter. People were like, that was a great play. We were like, I know, but there's only one 10 out of 10. That's tarp catch.
Right.
I got 2 other 9s for you if you recall these ones. The one where he gets the cutoff throw from Cargo and left in the middle of the air, cuts it off, throws it back to third base behind the guy to get the runner at third. I think that was year 2. He maybe reinvented how to receive a cutoff throw from the outfield. That was amazing.
That's I actually think this next phrase I'm going to use, Drew and Patrick, is a tired phrase. However, it really applies to the play you're talking about. You know how now we always talk about, oh, he's got high basketball IQ, he's got high baseball IQ, he's got high. What the hell does that mean? I mean, I know what it means, but come on. No,
right.
Listen, he's a smart player. He understands the game, but we now go, he's a moron everywhere else, but he's got high football IQ.
Right.
But
guy can't complete an order at McDonald's.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that one, that showed, and there's many other examples, the clock he had in his head, the understanding of where runners are and what they may attempt to do, trail runners. And that was I'm glad you made that, pointed that one out, because it's a beautiful example of not just great athleticism, because ultimately it was a very short throw, but just thinking, what is that trail runner doing? And it turned out to be a phenomenal play.
The other one I wanted to mention, I want to get you in there on it, Patrick, and actually 2 of them sprung to my head. This is going to keep happening, right? But and I've talked about this before, the time he fielded a bunt that ended up on the pitcher's side, or the first base side of the pitcher's mound, fielded it barehand and threw back to second base to get the lead runner at Coors. I can't remember who that was against, but I remember seeing that one coming with how hard he was charging the bunt right before. I was like, he's going to try to do this. Yeah. He's really going to try to do this, and then he did.
That was in the last couple of years. I remember that one very well. I can't tell you who it was against, but you just don't see that. You don't see the third baseman field a bunt and get the force out at second. Doesn't happen. No matter what guy's charge.
Yeah.
The throw, when a third baseman's coming in on a slow roller and has to throw across his body, you have to throw it up the line a little bit, because you're going to get a lot of run action. So it's got to be semi down the right field line, and it's going to bend back. Well, when you're throwing to second base, it is that much more across your body. So to make that throw, to have the guts to make that throw and to make it accurately, the degree of difficulty is extremely high.
The 2 that I love is the one where he goes to his left and it looks like he caught the ball, but he really just knocks it down, bends over to pick it up, doesn't even re-grip, and throws, almost a strike. It was about face high to Morneau, and it looked like it had to have been at least 100 miles an hour, barely gets the runner. And you're like, anyone else, that's just E5. Great play on it, probably gets a hit, but Arenado makes that play a million times over. And any barehanded play he makes on a bunt.
Yeah. I said this on the air a couple times over the years, and that is, we know he has a gold glove, but he also has a golden hand, right?
Yeah, right.
He fields the ball with his bare hand, like most guys wish they could field it with leather.
Yeah, I was trying to come up with the phrase bare hand Luke. Anytime he has a bare hand, but like you said, he's got the gold glove. The other hand, still, everything he touches is gold. It's the hand of Midas. That could have been the phrase that worked.
See, Patrick, I'm old enough to remember the great and late Paul Newman, one of my all-time favorite actors, in Cool Hand Luke. You, my friend, are not old enough, but the reference, I wish I was as clever and as witty as you, because that is a great reference.
And usually when I tell people that, we really just have a failure to communicate. And that's a shame from time to time.
Amazing. Amazing that didn't catch on with our audience and that they didn't understand that reference.
All right, very very quickly in the fight scene with Paul Newman in Cool Hand Luke, what actor was he getting his bleep kicked by?
Oh, I don't know. If you give me the initials,
the late George Kennedy.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Of Naked Gun fame. It's a shame that's how people remember him rather than.
Have I completely steered your train off course now on the podcast?
Only because this is the third time this week we've had a George Kennedy reference. But other than that, it's not for any other reason.
My mom was there in the comments, just late coming in after that. It's fantastic.
Barbara's joining us. What did Barbara say?
She just had George Kennedy. She's loosely interested in the rest of this stuff.
Right.
We're speaking her language.
I love your mom. She's way up to speed on 60s and 70s film.
It's ready to go. I assume you remember this one. Will popped in, and I had forgotten about it until his rookie year against the Phillies. I think you're right about that. The pitcher made a slash bunt. Nolan's in guarding against the bunt. He's basically fielding the baseball as it's behind him. Frazier, I think that's George Frazier on the holy what did I just see call on that one. I've got his voice in my head going, the baseball was behind him. I mean, it was, and he just flipped over and again from his butt throws a strike to first base.
I talked to George for 45 minutes this morning, by the way.
Tell him we miss him. All Rockies fans everywhere.
I will. I do actually get that question a lot. Hey, do you ever talk to Frazier anymore? I said I talk to Frazier like twice a week. So, yeah.
See, it's special for us. For you, it's like,
yeah. No, he makes my day. He cracks me up. I'll have to ask him about that play though. I vaguely recall something along those lines, but I'll have to ask him about that.
There was another one where Nolan did go into the stands on a ball, and it was a much higher pop-up, so he had some time to camp underneath it. But, went into the stands, came out, and then you just see him kind of rubbing his back a little bit like, I think the cup holder got me. I'll
tell you another play, and they're not necessarily, these aren't, in Creasman's, what is it, Arenado Meter? What is it again?
Yeah. That's right, the Arenado Meter.
This isn't in the top 500 because we've seen them a bunch, but it's just funny how Nolan, one of the little idiosyncrasies of how he played defense is, medium type of velocity off the bat, ground ball toward the, shortstop or maybe the 5.5 hole. He cuts it off, and he's got plenty of time because it's not a slow roller. Plenty of time, and he'd like run, and you're thinking he still hasn't thrown it. It would look like he's going to sprint to first and race the guy, and then he'd finally deliver it. And by the time he delivered, he was behind the pitcher's mound. But you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I remember. Yeah, like even those and he'd like bobbling the ball just a little bit, and then he's boom got the, and you're like. Even somebody mentioned the sitting throw in San Francisco where, even when he doesn't quite make the play and he knocks the ball down and then he just kind of comes up and fires from his butt. It's like even when he doesn't make the perfect play, he still figures out these ways to. Yeah. Absolutely incredible.
There were many times I wanted to yell, "That was sick."
Right?
Oh, man.
I like even similar to that where he's behind the mound is when he full extension to his left on a ball that, like you said, 5.5 hole that the shortstop backhands and it's just a hit. You got no play. He goes and fires over and gets the lead runner on second base, and nobody else makes that play. He just makes plays that just become common, as you guys are both saying, and it just becomes ho hum. And for anyone else, it's truly a highlight. And I think that's one of the biggest things I'm going to miss is just one of those plays that whoever's playing third base for the Rockies, or even if it's somebody on the other team, you just look and you go, Arenado makes that play really, really easily. And that's going to be a hard thing for the next guy to fill his shoes, is because it's not fair to be compared with the greatest of all time defensively at that position. And, where we were lucky to have seen that.
No, it's like in my colleague, Joe Davis, a terrific young announcer, and he does a marvelous job. I mean, Joe Davis is great. But you never want to be the guy, and he's pulling it off, but you want to be the guy that comes after Vin Scully, right? You don't want to be the guy that replaced, Babe Ruth in right field or Lou Gehrig at first. So, listen, it'll probably be, I'm guessing, educated guess, it'll be Ryan McMahon. And Ryan McNair's an intriguing guy in that he has star-level ability. He had a disappointing 60 games. He was second on the club with 9 home runs, but the strikeout rate way too high, and he'd be the first to tell you that. But athletic ability-wise, if you're just talking about like who's a better athlete, Ryan McMahon's a much better athlete than Nolan. We're not putting him anywhere in that class defensively, but he has the ability, big arm, great mobility, good hands. So, we'll see how he fares over at third base, which is his natural position.
Yeah, I think there'll be some growing pains, I think, for lack of a better term for Rymack, only because the last 2 seasons he's been at second base and first base. So he hasn't been getting those reps. That might be his natural position now, but he just hasn't had those opportunities. So he's definitely going to figure it out. And as you said, he was a quarterback in high school. Again, mobility, from behind the center position, whereas Nolan, maybe a tight end in high school if we're talking about athleticism.
More of a left tackle.
Well, famously, and that's why, earlier at the start of your guys' podcast today, we were talking about the prospects, right? And what's going to happen with them and who are you excited about? You never know with prospects. You really never know. And I'll give you a great example. The guy we're talking about, the guy that's bummed everybody out because he's no longer a Rocky this week, Nolan, if you read some of the early scouting reports, when he was coming out of Orange County in high school, they were saying he's going to have to catch because he's not athletic enough to play short, or certainly short. He's not athletic enough to play third. They didn't like the body. He's going to have to go behind the plate. And the tool that, most people were excited about and why he was a second-round pick, remember that, not a first-round pick, right. Wasn't a supplemental number 1. He was a second-round pick, was the bat. Well, we know the bat arrived and he became an elite offensive player. He is an elite offensive player, but nobody forecasted him staying at third or becoming arguably the greatest defensive third baseman we've seen. So you never know with young players. You never know.
I do want to get into a couple more Nolan memories and look a little bit forward at some of these guys. I want to get your take a little bit on some of the Brendan Rodgers and Garrett Hampsons and these guys of the world who could, as I've dubbed them, the lost boys, who could be that next thing that makes people come into the new era of Colorado Rockies. And if you want to be really ready for it, because some of the best ways, I'll tell you what, to understand some of these guys, you get educated, you get smart, and then you can go and learn about some of the information out there. And one of the best places to get educated, especially right now, is MSU Denver Online. They got great classes for you from experts in the field who also work in the field and can get you hooked up with jobs and all kinds of cool stuff. So make sure that you go to msudenver.edu/online and use the promo code DNVR Sports because they'll waive the application fee for you. You can get yourself a fantastic online digital safe education right now from the experts in the field. And then you get yourself stocked up on some beef. We've been bringing you damn good beer with Breck Brew, and now we're bringing you damn good beef with Hassel Cattle Company, the leaders in Wagyu beef. And really this isn't on my ad read thing here. I'm telling you all now as just a person who bought a whole bunch of this stuff. It's totally changed the way I'm buying beef from now on. I'm not going back to the grocery store. It's fantastic because it's hormone-free. They got free range. They're taking care of their beef. They're taking care of your body by not putting all that weird stuff in there. And they're taking care of your wallet by not charging you ridiculous, exorbitant amounts. In fact, when you take advantage of a lot of the deals they've got on there at HassleCattleCompany.com, you can end up spending less than you would at the grocery store. I highly, highly recommend it. My challenge remains open. I've had a lot of people tell me they've got the beef and they love it. One person tell me you ordered some and you were disappointed. Find me one person. Hasn't happened yet. I don't think it's going to happen. It's too delicious. Use the code DNVR10 for 10% off your order at HassleCattleCompany.com, HASSELL cattlecompany.com. And if you order over $200, you get free shipping. Again, highly recommend.
Drew, you do a heck of a job with sales, and I'm going to hire you. I think because I'm going to try to move some not only my podcast, but I'm going to try to move some books and T-shirts. Can you help me out later?
Voice for hire. I said, well, we've talked before about starting a segment on the show where people just write something in for me to read. I have one gift.
The voice of eBay, Drew Creasman. He will help you sell your stuff.
I just missed my window. That's the problem, is I would have been much better for the previous era of advertising. We don't, or like the movie guy, like the movie that doesn't, when was the last time you watched a movie trailer and someone went, in a world, one man, one dream? You know, we don't, that guy, like I could have had that job, but there isn't that job anymore. So
I used to do for back in the 90s, I did the Women's Pro Beach Volleyball Tour, and I did some ski stuff, and Echo Entertainment, Hugh Arian, I'm giving a plug to a guy based out of Southern California, great guy, old friend. I haven't worked with him a number of years, but one of the things they did on the side were movie trailers. And I was always fascinated by it because editing those together so you're like on the edge of your seat, I got to go run out and go to the local theater to watch those is an art form. And so I'm with you, man. I like movie trailers. Man, we've gotten off topic at times today. Patrick, put it back, put the train back up.
This is a challenge here. This is why I allow Drew do the reads, man. He can weave a web pretty easily. But you know what? In the wake of Arenado's trade, there's still some great players left behind, and as Drew kind of our boy DC kind of alluded to, you know, he's called them the Lost Boys because, you know, say what you will about, you know, the Rockies prospects and how they've drafted and whatever, but there's a group of players on this team right now that, you know, they've been in the league for a year or two, so they're not prospects and they're still far from veterans. That if these guys can actually step up and play to the expectations that a lot of people think they can, you know, the Rockies are going to be better sooner than a lot of people think.
They're going to get an opportunity, Patrick, and I think a lot of times with guys who have talent, all they need is opportunity. That doesn't mean that every guy who has talent and gets an opportunity becomes an impactful player. But I'm really intrigued by Sam Hilliard. I know you guys are as well. I'm a big Garrett Hampson fan. And now, you know, Nolan's not there. We all know that. Everybody's suffering through that realization at whatever level this week. But somebody's got to play third base, and somebody's going to move up in the lineup. And as opposed to this great player maybe blocking an everyday appearance by a Hampson or you know, in an indirect way, a Hilliard or Brendan Rodgers, they're going to get their chance, and hopefully all of them, you know, elevate their game, and we know that Hampson and Hilliard have now, you know, gotten their feet wet over the last couple of years, and we've seen some good, we've seen some bad, but now where it's going to be sustained more often than not every day, we'll see if some of these guys can emerge. And that will be the exciting part of this next chapter, as disappointing and as hurting as everybody is in Rockies Nation right now. You gotta move forward, man, because it's now yesterday. You know, Nolan's a Cardinal. That sucks, right? But now what's going to happen moving forward?
The one guy that I'm looking forward to see is Colton Welker, because hey, Tulo goes next season, you get Trevor Story, problems are completely alleviated. Arenado's gone. Well, what if Colton Welker is that guy that follows in the footsteps of Story, who people were overlooking and finally, you know, lives up to the hype that he's had on him for a few years in the minors?
I know it's easy, and the Rockies are getting you know, beat up this week, and sometimes with reason. We understand that, and when you look historically at the Rockies, particularly with position players, they've done a good job. And not all of these guys that emerged as star level players were first round picks. And we've talked the whole show about Nolan. Nolan was not a first round pick. So when you talk about Colton Welker, Ryan Valade, we'll see with Rodgers, who was a very high pick naturally. They historically, Charlie Blackmon, second round pick. Guys that became, you know, in the case of Blackmon, Arenado, superstars, right? Trevor Story was a pretty high pick, but nobody had him becoming Trevor Story. So the history, particularly on that side of the ball, for Billy Schmidt and his crew is pretty good. And so who's that next guy, or maybe that next couple of guys that a year from now, or maybe even in the midst of this year, we're looking and going, holy smokes, this guy's pretty darn good. This guy's taking a quantum leap forward. And hopefully, when the three of us during the season are gathering after a Tuesday night ball game, we're going, shoot, this dude's good. So
one of those dudes that I think could be doing that really would have the whole world going, what? How did we all miss this? Patrick's been chronicling him from the beginning. Had a season this last year that made people go, oh, I think, and is also now in a weird spot. I believe there may be some relation to the ball player who just left the team. I can't recall if that's true or not. But what is your take on what this young man, Josh Fuentes, because it just seems like it's such this weird combination of, again, you've been around the game forever. There's this like pedigree and talent. And usually to some degree, those things match up. And Josh Fuentes has zero pedigree and is showing us just an extraordinary amount of talent and drive. And I don't know, I think the sky could be the limit for this kid.
Well, what I would say to answer your question, Drew, and I'm going to be, brutally honest here. 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, the end of 2019, when he came up and he had a great year, I think that was his MVP year in the Pacific Coast League. He came up and I was underwhelmed. He was overmatched. And again, if he was sitting here on this podcast with us, he'd probably say, yeah, I was overmatched in that September. A lot of strikeouts, hard to find a barrel. The next year is 2020, shortened season. We understand that. Finding a lot of barrels, was a wizard at first base. I mean, he played a plus defensive first base, really good hands. And it got me thinking about him as the season, it was only 2 months, but as it progressed, he's one of those guys that, first of all, he's like his cousin. He's a baseball player. He's a dirtbag. And he's also one of those athletes that you never bet against. Because you say, okay, is he a sexy looking guy physically? Not really. Is he a sexy looking guy athletically? No. Is he, got this, that, or the other thing that we always associate with greatness? Maybe not. But to Drew's point, every time he just keeps getting better and better, and maybe just let him play and see what he becomes. Because when you look at everything, you go, okay, he's a little better than I thought, and maybe he's a bench guy in the big leagues. And then, maybe going forward, he's more than that. And maybe he takes it another step or two and he's a 20-plus home run guy, and he's a higher average guy than you thought. So I'm never going to, sell what I've seen so far of Josh Fuentes short, because he has great desire, great want to, and for those reasons, let's just watch this kid and let him play and see how it all looks going forward.
He's had to prove himself at every level. I mean, was a junior college guy, went to Missouri Baptist University in St. Louis, so he's got some experience with fans out there.
And we know, Patrick, I mean, there's a long line of great players that have come out of Missouri Baptist.
Oh, yeah.
Drew will enlighten all of us to that list.
Go ahead there.
George Kennedy, of course, as well,
Very good ball player.
Tom Brady.
But with Fuentes, when I got to know him in 2018, he had a really good season at AA in Hartford. 2018, got to see a lot of him in Albuquerque. Went down there about 4 different trips. And every time he just kept getting better and better. And, I talked to a different guy after every game, except Fuentes. I had to talk to him after every game. Very quotable of a guy. And his defense was remarkable over at third base. And he had even yet to really start playing first base. He just had this athleticism and this, just ability to sense where the ball's going, a lot like his cousin. And I asked him, I said, all right, if you both had to be on the left side of the infield, who's moving the shortstop? Who's playing third base? And I would have guessed he would have said, yeah, I can play shortstop. But no, he said, Nolan can go play short. I'm the third baseman of the family. And he's got that kind of confidence, and he's been proving it ever since.
Right. He does have that confidence. And it's, there's some guys that are confident and you think there's arrogance. There's not. He's a sweetheart of a kid. And he's a really outgoing kid. I mean, quite honestly, he's more, and I love Nolan, but he's more outgoing than Nolan. He's more approachable, than Nolan for most people. And again, you just don't ever want to sell a player with his makeup and his intangibles short. And you're right, Patrick. Thanks for the subtle correction. In 2018, he was the PCL Player of the Year, MVP. Didn't get called up that September, which was more fuel in the tank for him. And in 2019, he did finally arrive in the big leagues. And, I thought he was overmatched. And last year, you go, whoa, hold on a second. We've seen some nice things from him. So let's watch him play in 2021 and see where it goes.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a let's see where these guys go type of season, right? Like that's the one thing that, and even before I knew this was going to go down with Nolan, when I wrote about the Lost Boys, I was just trying to say, like, look, man, people out there can roll their eyes because they haven't seen what they wanted to out of these guys yet so far. And Curvin, no one in the world needs to tell me not to overlook Raimel Tapia. I will tell you what, I have been a Raimel Tapia fan, and I will use that word fan since 2013.
Happy birthday, Raimel. Today's his day.
Is that right?
Yeah, 27.
He's another guy for me, and he had a nice year in 2020 and kind of took over that top spot in the lineup, which was a revolving door for a while.
Yeah.
A lot of singles. There wasn't a lot of extra base hit in him, even though he's physically gotten so much stronger than he was when he first arrived as a kid from Latin America. He's a very hard worker. I think he was a below average outfielder. I think he's improved. He has to hit cutoff men. I think that's improved. It certainly as the year wore on. Base running sometimes left something to be desired, but he makes progress, and he's another guy that let him play because it may keep getting better. Maybe we still see the high on base percentage, a few more walks, and maybe because of that strength, we start to see the ball in the gap a little bit more and occasionally over the wall. So sometimes players don't arrive in the time frame that we'd like them. Scouts may project, this will be the year. Like I thought last year was going to be the year for Ryan McMahon. It wasn't.
We were all on that boat.
Everybody was. I watched spring training. He was shorter to the baseball. He'd gotten rid of the Nike swoosh because anything above 92 he struggled to catch up to in 2019 and 2018. But I watched him in spring training. He put a lot of work in. It didn't play out in the truncated season, but maybe it does in 2021. Maybe Raimel Tapia makes another nice stride in 2021. And that's the beauty of the sport. It's the beauty of athletics in that we don't know until we see what goes forward with these guys. But you're talking about some highly motivated guys in Raimel Tapia, in Josh Fuentes, in Ryan McMahon.
Yeah, I think those guys are going to.
We mentioned it earlier, fellas.
Hampson,
Hilliard in that group too. I mean, great work ethic guys, high character guys that it's really important to. They are far from content because they've gotten to the major leagues. They want to be big time players.
And to a lesser extent, guys we didn't see last year, but we did in 2019. Jonathan Daza, Dom Nunez. Again, they might not have done it in that timeline that you would want them to, but they're going to have that opportunity and very well could be the players the Rockies have long thought they would be.
That's fair. I mean, Dom Nunez, we saw briefly a couple of years ago, and he has an opportunity now. He has an opportunity. Tony Walters is not, with the Rockies any longer. Diaz, we saw the bat have some impact late last year. He hit the only 2 home runs for the catchers with the Rockies. The Rockies have to get more production behind the plate. We understand their number one thing with a catcher is always handling a pitching staff. It's the number one defensive position in the sport. But the Rockies have to get more offensively. It can't be an out at the bottom of the lineup. And Dom Nunez has been a professional now for a while, and he's going to have an opportunity.
Yeah, that's maybe I think we're now ready to move into the next stage of this whole thing, which is looking forward, and where I do get to start telling people that's what I'm most excited about for watching Rockies games this year. Is it's always been one of my favorite things in baseball is I want to see what you got. That's basically what we're saying here, right? Let's see what they got. I want to see what these young men have gotten, and there's been a lot of back and forth. Can they? Some opportunity, but then the star comes back from being hurt or whatever, so Tapia goes to the bench or whomever, and now it's just we're going to see what a lot of these guys have, and some of them will pleasantly surprise the world. That'll
right. And listen, there's going to be disappointments. There's going to be, hey,
sure,
this guy never panned out. We've seen a lot of that. I'm not trying to pile on Jeff Hoffman. Jeff Hoffman never panned out. When the Rockies famously traded Ubaldo Jimenez, they got the two top pitching prospects in the Indians organization, Drew Pomerantz and Alex White. Now, Drew Pomerantz is still pitching in the big leagues. He's an effective bullpen piece, but he never became that guy as a starter. He was drafted in the projections. People saw him pitching near the top of a rotation for a long period of time. Never happened. Alex White, never happened. Injuries, been out of baseball for a couple of years. So there are disappointments. There's probably more disappointments than good stories where guys emerge. However, I find it as satisfying and gratifying to watch the established star as it is, to watch the rising star as it is to watch the established star. I mean, how much fun was it watching the opening week of Trevor Story's career a few years ago, and now watching where Trevor has moved to in the hierarchy of not just shortstops, but great players in the game. And so who's that next guy? Because we can't change what happened yesterday. Nolan Arenado, even though it's going to sicken people, Nolan Arenado's a Cardinal now. Can't change that. Let's move forward and say, okay, where are we today? And yeah, we're not as good as a club as we were yesterday, but who's going to step forward? Who's going to grab hold of an opportunity and become an impactful player? And that'll be the fun part, hopefully, of 2021 and seeing, and hopefully there are multiple answers to that question.
And whose season will they spoil? The Dodgers or the Padres? Because they'll have an opportunity to be big factors in the NLS this season for sure.
Yeah. Well, whenever you play everybody 19 times inside your division, yeah, you're gonna have chances to upset the apple cart.
I remember something John Gray told me before he had made his debut, but I can't remember the exact time. I can't place it, but I was talking to him about Raimel Tapia, and he was saying, he's not the guy who's going to hit the big monster home run on you, make you feel like just an idiot for having made a mistake. But he's like, but he will just foul off. And then he goes, he's the most irritating guy to pitch to. And I just kind of think like that can be these Rockies next year. They can be the most irritating team in baseball to play because you show up and they're looking at the lineup and the other pitcher's going, I can get all these guys out. But then Tapia's putting together an at-bat. Hampson's doing a thing. Maybe you do make a mistake and Hilliard hits one 500 feet. And then all of a sudden you're going, I didn't realize these guys could do this to me. Like, I think this team can be that concept.
Well, clearly, Drew, as you guys well know, and all good Rockies fans well know, the offense the last couple of years has been the Achilles heel, which people would never say, right? With the Rockies playing at Coors Field, the offense is always going to be there. The offense was not good the last couple of years. Hey, quite frankly, in 2018, when the chips were down, the offense was not good. I mean, they scored 2 runs against Milwaukee and got swept. And they have to collectively significantly lower their strikeout rate. I know we live in an era of the home run, the strikeout, and the walk. The Rockies, especially playing at 20th and Blake, have to get the ball in play. And you reminded me of it because you talked about Tapia. And though it's unorthodox at times, Tapia has great hand-eye coordination, does foul off a lot of pitches. Remember, we saw several 10-plus pitch at-bats that ended up with a hard single between short and third. And the Rockies, I'm not saying Garrett Hampson's not going to strike out and Hilliard's not going to strike out McMahon. It can't be in the 35, 36% range. They have to shave 10% off that. Easier said than done, but the Rockies have to get the ball in play more than they did collectively the last couple of years.
And then, as you talked about, and we do got to wrap it up here, but it is funny. We've had this big whole long conversation today, and I don't think we've talked about any pitchers because it hasn't been the topic. But those are the guys. Look, it remains the case that Germán Marquez, Kyle Freeland, John Gray, and Antonio Senzatella can keep this team in ball games, and interesting stuff can happen. You need some help there. A lot of questions with Castellani and Rollison, and I'm throwing a big topic at you as we sign off here, Goody. But that really is the heart and soul and power of this team.
Yeah, who would have ever thought that historically with the Rockies? And throw Gomber in there, who they picked up from St. Louis. I mean, Gomber is going to be right in the mix for that fifth spot in the rotation, and/or a spot in the bullpen. But they want him to compete for that fifth spot in the rotation. The strength of this team right now is their rotation. And hear me on this one, and I think you guys will concur. Even if Nolan was still a Rocky, the strength of this club going into 2021 would be that rotation. There are a number of teams that would gladly trade their rotation for the Rockies, led by Germán Marquez, Kyle Freeland, Antonio Senzatella, who made a significant leap last year, and hopefully a healthy John Gray. It's a nice quartet. I'm not saying it's as good as maybe San Diego or the Dodgers roll out, but it's pretty good. And, now we'll find out who else can contribute down there. And, we talked about the offense having to be better. But right now, the strength of this club going into 2021 is the guys that will take the baseball to start ball games.
Yeah, always be something interesting to watch therefore. And you know where you can watch it, on AT&T SportsNet, and you'll hear Mr. Drew Goodman right there with his many partners, all of whom we love. Huey got shout-outs today. We love Jenny and Spilly and Sully and everybody down there, and all the incredibly hardworking people behind the scenes who, never seems like there's enough time in the day to give those people all.
No, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because they are numerous, and people see the stooges who are in front of the camera. We're all stooges other than Jenny. Jenny's not a stooge. But Mark Stout and everybody. But there are so many people behind the scenes that, dozens of people that bust their butt and do an incredible job. And I always say this, that we're very fortunate in this region to have some of the best people in the business technically working on our regional broadcast. And I think one of the reasons is there's multiple reasons, but one of the reasons is we live in such a beautiful place. So there are people who work nationally on a regular basis because they're recognized as the best in their field, but they're also working with us on Rockies broadcast. So we're really fortunate in that regard. I'm glad you mentioned that, Drew.
I miss seeing Doug Marino around the ballpark because he's a human encyclopedia. He knows everything about baseball, and if he doesn't, give him 3 minutes and he'll find the answer.
Doug knows. He knows a lot about a lot of things, but at the top of the chart is baseball, and he loves like the Federalist League. He can, as you know, anytime Doug can hand me a note that works in like High Pockets Kelly or somebody who played in 1882.
Chicago Whalers.
Like the greatest day of his life. And he also knows he's forgotten more music than most of us will ever know.
Yeah, just like Patrick said, a walking encyclopedia. And you got to appreciate whoever's got the very difficult job of finding and framing those beautiful Colorado sunsets that we always get on AT&T SportsNet.
Well, we got a lot of great
job.
Yeah, a lot of great. Ryan Morrison, great cameraman. Charlie Felix, great cameraman, and a lot of other guys. So and women. So we appreciate that shout out, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you got to be listening to the Drew Goodman podcast. You don't want to miss any of that stuff, as he said, in depth with Jeff Hewson this week. Always great guests on that show. You don't want to miss it. Make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast app you're using to probably listen to this show right now. You can just go right on over there, type in Drew Goodman podcast. It'll come up. Sub to that thing. It's great content. You don't want to miss it.
Yeah, thanks for that plug. You guys, I'm thrilled to be with you guys every week, and we're going to continue this, I know, through the season and beyond. And it's fun because you guys do a great job, and you have the pulse of the club because you're around the club every day, but you're fair. And as I said to you, I think last week on one of the other shows, doing it every single day is yeoman work. And this week you were provided with probably more material than you wanted right now, any of us. But my hat's off to you guys for what you guys produce on a daily basis.
Thank you, Goody.
We were a week and a half ago and like, slow off season, man. I really wish something would just happen.
I think I was talking to Patrick one day on the phone a few weeks back, and I was like, what do you got today, man? It's like the whole industry it's screeched to a halt. It wasn't just like Rocky stuff. I mean, what were we going to talk about? By the way, we got to get into, and I know you guys have covered this, but I have some takes, and we're out of time today, but on this whole impasse with the Players Association and the owners and the overall look for baseball and looking ahead to the CBA and beyond. There's a lot of material there, and I have I'm not going to do it now, but if we can get into it next week, I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit.
Yeah, I know you do that with Houston on the episode today, and he's got, again, great perspective because he's been involved in those player strikes, or he's been around for that during his time as a 12-year vet. So it's some great insight on the episode today.
Yeah, and Jeff also was a player rep, so I mean he sees both sides of it. And can really and does articulate some interesting observations about where we are as we embark on 2021 and the continued antipathy between these two sides. So we talk about that in addition, obviously, to Nolan this week on the podcast.
Well, the only way to make sure that you don't miss out on any of that stuff is to do all the things you got to do. As I said, follow the Drew Goodman podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to this one. Follow everyone on social media at Drew Creasman, at Patrick D. Lyons, at Drew Goodman 42, and of course at DNVR_Rockies. Then when you subscribe to the DNVR.com, you get access to all of our written content for all of the sports. Plus you get discounts on hats, shirts, and masks. You get a bigger beer when you come down to the DNVR bar for one of our watch parties, again, at safe capacity right now. And you get to come and hang out with us in the private chat. So if you've got ideas for topics you want to hear Drew Goodman get up on his soapbox about in the future, let us know right there in the chat. Come hang out with us in the YouTube, subscribe there, all those things. That way you make sure you never miss it. But yeah, I think it sounds like we've got ourselves a good topic for next week as well. Remember, we're going to be doing these regularly. The only way you make sure you don't miss them is to subscribe to the DNVR Rockies YouTube channel. So
I can't wait until we can have a not even a socially distanced a proper cold one over at the DNVR, man, after one of the podcasts. So it'll be fun.
Oh, that is a life goal to be reached, hopefully sooner rather than later, to be down there and doing the thing, because talking baseball over a cold one in real life, as much as we love our partners over at Zoom Care, and we love them, and that's great for the doctor's office, baseball and talking baseball better amongst a community, and that's why we're so glad to have everyone here involved and to have Drew Goodman now as a part of our community, man. We really do appreciate that. So
I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys having me on, and it's a fun new alliance, so I'm psyched for it.
Right on. Well, make sure everyone out there, you continue to be absolutely awesome baseball fans. We promise you we will continue to be absolutely Patrick Lyons, Drew Creasman, and Drew Goodman. And until next time, we will see you at the ballpark.